Daniel was homesick. He was homesick for Jerusalem, for his native land of Judea, homesick for the familiar, for the scenes and the sights and the sounds and the smells that had been a part of his entire life. But his people had sinned. They had been exiled to Babylon. They had been carried away into captivity, and now he was stuck there in Babylon, a strange society, and even stranger people. But it wasn't that he was just homesick for home. He was homesick for those things, but even more so, he was homesick for God, for his precepts and his promises that regulated things and gave him hope and purpose and direction in life. He missed the fellowship and the camaraderie and the communion with his Jewish family and with God and the temple and all the practices and the principles of life as he grew up knowing life. You know, being homesick is no laughing matter. If you have ever experienced it, you would not think it's something to just laugh at. Not only are you missing things, but things just don't seem right or they don't feel right. And you can get very sick from those things depending on who you are and how you can adjust. A young boy was asked if he was homesick, and he said, "No, but I am sure he's sick." He was sick of where he was, but he wasn't homesick. but that's kind of how we feel. If you've ever been far away in another culture and another country and another language, and everything is strange and different, you really miss the familiar. When you go back home, you kind of feel good about it. We went to Lithuania for 2 weeks in 1997. That's a while back. And for 2 weeks, we couldn't speak the language. And so everything that we did there, and everything that we did at home that was second nature to us, became a real struggle. It was difficult. It just had all kinds of difficulties about it. For instance, when we went shopping for some food, we used the Grunton Point message, because we didn't know how to say things in the store, and everything you got there was from the store, that the meat department and everything, and so you had to go in there and point and everything. And we were going to be missionaries there, and things didn't work out, and so that's okay. But we got back home, and it was kind of like normal again, and we could sleep in our own bed and all of those things, and so it was strange. And to top it off, Brock being a diabetic, we had to look after the insulin and all of that stuff over there, that part, and so it was different. So anyways, Daniel was down in Babylon, and he's very homesick. He's homesick for God and country and kinfolk and all of that. But he's stuck there. Now, he felt like, he felt like God wasn't with him. It's kind of the concept that they had back then. They had gods of the valleys that fought in the valleys and gods that fought in the hills. And so if my God that I believed in fought in the valley, I would want to go have my war with someone in the valley because I had a better chance of winning, and that kind of thing. Well, what happens to Daniel begins strangely. God comes to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in a dream. What a strange thing to show this awesome sight of a gigantic statue towering over him. And when he wakes up in the morning, he has this dark cloud hanging over him, and the king is very troubled in his soul. And so he wants to know, what is the meaning of this dream? Have you ever had a dream and woken up feeling troubled? Diane has dreams sometimes. She used to have them more than she does now. She'd wake up and she'd said, that dream was really disturbing. She wouldn't tell me what the dream was, so maybe it was about me. I don't know. But she was having these bad dreams, and she was quite bothered by them. It affects how you act the next day and maybe days on. And you think, what in the world was that all about? But it was a dream, and after a while you dismiss it and it goes away. Well, This one didn't go away for Nebuchadnezzar. In fact, it caused him to sink into an overwhelming depression. And so he wanted to understand and figure out what that dream meant. So he sent word to the magicians and the astrologers and the wise men of Babylon and said, I want you to come here and I want you to tell me my dream and interpret it for me. You say, what? The magicians and the astrologers are nobody's fool, and they've played this game all their life. So they say, well, we can interpret your dream all right, so you tell us what the dream was. Well, if you are going to give an interpretation that goes on for about 5 centuries, I could interpret it just fine. You got a dream, I'll tell you what it'll be 5 centuries from now, because you're going to be long dead, and you won't have a clue if I was ever right, wrong, or otherwise, right? So they said, tell us the dream. But Nebuchadnezzar says, I'm nobody's fool either. And I know that because he said, you are just stalling. You want to stonewall me because you don't know. And if I tell you my dream, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me. He said, if you don't tell me my dream and interpret it, you'll all die. Whoa, that's tough. So the king, there is no man on earth, they say to the king. They say, there's no one. He said, the gods don't live with us here. Now they're shaking in their boots and they're starting to realize some things that they've been playing they could do, right? And they said, we don't know. No one can do that. And he says, well, all right, then you'll all die. Now, was Daniel exaggerating when he wrote this? I don't think so. I did a little research. An Eastern self-appointed dictator would do exactly that. He had the power and the authority to do that. You hear it on the news, you read it in the papers. Guys like Saddam Hussein and other guys, they are the law in their country. Maybe they're crazy, but they're still the law. And so whatever they do, prejudice they have, whatever they do, they can do it at whatever whim they have. So the king says, you'll all die. The problem with that was that there were some fellas there by the name of Daniel and Meshach and Abednego and Shadrach, and perhaps others of the Jews who were among this group of so-called the wise men of Babylon. And so they're in there, and they're going to get the same treatment as all those guys. So the executioner comes along, and he says, well, you're going to be put to death. So Daniel says, hold on there just a minute, buddy. He says, give me some time. Let me have a chance. So off he goes, and he parleys with his buddies from home, and here is what he says to them. He says, pray to God for mercy. Kind of fits with the class we were talking about today. Pray to God for mercy. Ask him to help us and to spare us. Ask him to give us the dream and its interpretation. So he finally goes before the king and he says, I cannot interpret the dream, but there is a God in heaven who can. I'm no wiser than all these other guys. I'm no more special than all of these other guys. But he said, I did turn to prayer and talk to the God of heaven. Many times, I'm afraid we take credit for too much what God is doing in our life. Like for the thoughts that he plants in our hearts. A preacher said to the farmer, he said, that's a wonderful crop you have in that field. And the farmer says, yeah, the preacher said, the Lord has really done well for you. And the farmer turned and he said to the preacher, he said, you should have been here and seen this field when the Lord was working it all alone by himself. In other words, it was full of weeds and there was nothing there. We like to reach in and take our piece of the credit often, and we do that. So he says, I did that. I thought of that. I planned it. I made it happen. But the farmer, he said, but if we are tied to God, then we will always allow God, or at least God will be part of it. So Daniel says, give me a chance. I'm going to go pray to God. I'm going to inquire to this God of heaven, and we'll see what happens. And so Daniel has the same dream, the exact same dream. The statue appears to him in a dream, and it's just like Nebuchadnezzar saw. It was the same vision exactly, but now God gives Daniel the interpretation. He says, here was your dream. You saw a statue with a golden head, and that is you. It represents you and your kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar. You are the king, and the God of heaven has given you all this power and all of this might and glory. He gave you the beasts and man into your hands. And King Nebuchadnezzar's sitting there going, this doesn't hurt my ego at all, right? But there are 6 centuries before Christ, and before Christ. This is 6 centuries before Christ. So he tells the king, he is the apex of the statue. He's the head. You are the world power and the world empire now. After you, on that statue, were the arms and the breast of silver. As you look at that, you saw another kingdom after you, and as the metal is inferior, so is the value of the kingdom. And history tells us, and we know, that Babylon eventually was captured by the Medo-Persians. That happened when Belshazzar was reigning over Babylon, and he said, we're having a big party, and we're going to celebrate that we are in charge, and we have everything, and we will rule the world forever. We cannot be defeated. Well, at that very night, at that party, the writing was on the wall, literally. A hand appears and writes on the wall by the lampstand, according to Daniel, and it says, God has numbered your days, and they will be brought to an end. Now, Belshazzar was only king for just a little while. He said, you have been weighed and found wanting, and your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Mene, tekel, parsin. Well, that very night, the Medes and the Persians took over the kingdom, mid-5th century. So he says, look down that statue further, King Nebuchadnezzar, just a little further, and you see the belly and the thighs. And they are made of brass and bronze, which is inferior to gold and silver. Like the kingdom will also be inferior. Now, we all know again from history that we're now talking about Greece and Alexander the Great, whose conquests swept across the world, subduing everything before him. He was a tremendous conqueror in the early 4th century to approximately the middle of the 3rd century. They too had a good run and thought they were invincible, especially Alexander. That was the kingdom of Greece, or the Greeks, which was highly influential in setting the stage for the coming of the Messiah. And you say, what? This is only 3rd century. Hold on. He instituted the Greek language everywhere he went. Unlike the Romans allowed everybody to keep their language and everything and do their thing, but they were under the umbrella of the Roman. But the Greeks said, no, you're going to speak Greek. We want to know what you're speaking. We don't want to be blindsided by anything. And guess what? The common Greek that only lasted about 600 years is what the Bible was written in. And so for it to be properly interpreted, it has to go back to that common Greek language to be interpreted. Okay? Last, he says, you saw the legs and the feet that were made of iron, and the toes partly of iron and partly of clay. more inferior than all of those things, was the mighty Romans. They would seem very strong, but they were also very weak. They began in the middle of the 3rd century and were still ruling in the 1st century, almost until the 3rd century. History tells us that this was the Roman Empire. That is what you saw, O king. God has given you an overview of the world empires for the next 6 centuries. The king said, oh, okay, I get it. I had no idea, but God of heaven revealed this to me. This is what Daniel told him. That's amazing, isn't it? But Nebuchadnezzar's happy because he knows he's only going to live so long. So he's the apex, right? But he hears this interpretation and he's so impressed, not so much that he can interpret the dream, but that he knows what he dreamt. I mean, wouldn't you? If you woke up and rolled over and said, hey, Diane, what did I dream last night? And she told me, I'd be freaked out. Be like, where were you last night in my head? But he was impressed by that. Then as he watches a statue, the empires all fall apart, including Rome, and eventually are crushed and smashed to pieces by the end of these world empires. The interesting thing is that we can draw a whole lot of things from this, but let me tell you what stands out and impresses me. Many times the critical Bible scholars say the reason that prophecy worked like that 6 centuries before it actually happened is because they waited, now think about this, they waited until it happened, and then they went back to Daniel and stuck it in there in the book of Daniel like it was written back then. It's kind of like the fellow who had a reputation as a superior marksman. And everywhere he went, he would just, bam, fire his pistol and blow a hole right through the center of the chalk mark. And so one guy finally said to him, he said, how do you hit the center of the chalk mark every time? He said, well, it's really easy. He said, I fire my pistol and I go draw a circle around where the bullet went through. He said, it's in the center every time. That's what they're trying to accuse prophecy of being. That is what they want us to believe about the prophets. That they wait and they see how it all works out, and then they go back there and they put it back in there as if it happened back then. Like it's a big, huge pretense. Consider this. In what world, I mean, seriously, in what world are you going to take a book of Daniel and take it all the way down to the time of Jesus and write it and then make people believe that it was written 6 centuries ago? There is no way that would not happen. But they think he did. Now, if you believe the scripture is inspired, if you believe that was God working in the hearts and the minds of people and speaking through the mouths of his prophets, then you wouldn't question that true story. Only God can go into the future because he's already decided it. He can only go into the future and bring it back and say, this is what's going to happen back up there further on in the future. There's no pretense about it. Then Daniel says, but hold on, king. You saw something else, and I want to talk to you about that. He said, when you looked at that statue, you saw another thing happen that was absolutely amazing. It wasn't big in size, it wasn't a huge thing, but you saw it. It was a stone at the foot of the statue. That stone is the 5th kingdom or world empire, and it is unlike any of the others. It will be established in the middle of the 4th empire, in the middle of the Roman Empire. It is a stone cut out of the mountain without hands. How does that happen? Well, what does that mean? Daniel is saying it is a God thing. It was absolutely nothing. It had absolutely nothing to do with man or man's will or man's work. It is purely and wholly a God thing, and it's God doing it alone. It is made by the hands of the living God of heaven. Like Paul says, it is not a house made with hands. It is eternal in the heavens. It is built by God, and no man has anything to say about it or to do with it. He built it all by himself. So the stone is cut out of the mountain, and then look what happens. He says the stone hit that statue in the feet, and it shattered the entire statue. All of the kingdoms are finished. They're gone. They're no more. So, O king, here is what is going to happen. 1 Peter 2 says, the stone the builders rejected has become the capstone, a rock of offense, causing men to stumble and fall. And the reason for that is because they disobey the message, which is also what they are destined to do. They reject the stone. So we look again at the stone at the feet of the statue. We see the demolishing force of that stone. That being, of course, Christ Jesus, the king of that special fifth kingdom that was established during the Roman Empire. The kingdom that God is going to establish, Daniel says, has nothing to do with man and his hands and his work, but it all comes from God and is put together by God. It is nothing like the other kingdoms. It is different. It is built differently. It is spiritual in nature because it comes from God. And sometimes we have a little trouble wrapping our heads around all of that. But that doesn't make it untrue. This kingdom is so mighty that it will destroy all those other kingdoms, and it will grow and fill the whole earth, and it will never be destroyed. Never, ever, because it is eternal, and God has made it that way. We look at that and we say, how can that be? Well, because the stone is of God, and the destiny, like all the rest of the kingdoms, is determined by God. Now, we do not have to learn that the mystery is revealed. It's not hard for us to realize that that mystery revealed is the stone of Jesus Christ, or is Jesus Christ. If you had been Daniel way back in Babylon and you got this message, would you think God trusted you? Would you believe God was helping you, looking out for you, walking daily with you? Would you feel as homesick knowing that God was right there with you? Because when they prayed, God answered, because he was right there with them. So God is always amongst us and in situations with us and maneuvering and making things happen. But sometimes we let geography or distance or even science pull us away from God. And we have to be careful. The little boy had gotten into the car, and Mom and Dad had everything packed and ready to go for a 2-week vacation that they had planned for some time now. And they drove off and they passed the church building that the boy was so familiar with. And as they went by, he rolled down the window of the car and he waved and he said, "Goodbye, God, we're going on vacation." I don't know. What do you think? Do you look at God that way? I think sometimes we might. There was a family away from their congregation that they were part of and all of their lives, and so they moved to another country. After several years, the job he took was finished and they moved back home and tried to pick up where they left off. And they say, "Boy, it sure is good to be back at church." What? If we're the church, where do you think the church was all that time? Right? I mean, where were they? Where they were, was no church building and nobody worshiping God, at least in truth, like he wants us to worship. And so they had a 2-year hiatus, but they really shouldn't have, because they're the church. And God was right there with them, and they should have been worshiping God. But now we're back, so we can go to worship again. Our distance from God is our creation. It is our monster that we've made. God is always with us on vacation or in any other country or any other part of the world, and it makes absolutely no difference. When we went to Lithuania, God was with us just there, just as much as he was with us when we were here. It doesn't make any difference. Daniel found that out. God was with him in Babylon, and you think he was happy about that? You better believe it. It saved his life. He would live like he was there and always believe that he was with God, and that would make his life better. So you have to decide, are you part of the fifth kingdom? When you read Daniel's story, surely as we are here right now, you get a high view of what the kingdom of God is. The second struggle we have is that in many ways we reduce the magnificence and the magnificent ideas of God. We sometimes look at the church as a bunch of people playing religion or playing at religion, and some are, and we are not perfect, and some people are pretentious, and so that may be really what they're doing. We will be reading Daniel's. We won't be reading Daniel soon, but if you read Daniel, you would understand all of this. God is a really big deal. He's always there. And if you say you're a member of the kingdom, and they say, well, it really doesn't make much difference what you want to do or how you feel, wrong. You are part of the kingdom, and God is there with you. It has been God's plan, and he has built this kingdom to last forever, for all eternity. If you are not part of it, you better be getting to be part of it, and be part of it, because that is the best thing that can happen to you in this life, just like it happened to Daniel. Because this kingdom is real. This is it. Don't be looking for another kingdom to come or another kingdom to be established. This kingdom is the one, and it is established. Daniel learned that, and we need to learn that also. If you are not a child of God and you want to be part of that kingdom, why not be part of that kingdom? Make that choice. We try to be part of the kingdom, but we may fail sometimes. Some want to be part of the kingdom, but they never make that choice. They never make that step. We want people to realize that they need to be part of this kingdom, because that is what God wants of us. If you need to be part of this kingdom this morning, if you're not part of this kingdom, or if there's anything that we can help you with or serve you, we want you to let us know while we stand and sing.